A kind black waitress paid for an elderly man's coffee, not knowing that he was a billionaire looking for. "Look, another beggar trying to pass himself off as a customer," Manager Christopher's voice cut through the buzz of the coffee shop like a knife. "I've told you before, this isn't a shelter. No money, no service." The curious glances of the customers converged on the gray-haired, shabbily dressed elderly man standing at the counter. His hands trembled slightly as he rummaged through the empty pockets of his worn coat. "I swear I brought my wallet," he muttered, his voice trembling with embarrassment. "I just wanted a coffee to warm up before I went home." "And I just want paying customers," Christopher retorted, gesturing toward the door. "We have a strict no tramps policy." "You're scaring away real customers." Maya Johnson, 28, watched the scene unfold as she cleaned a nearby table. 6 months on the job had taught her when to intervene and when to remain invisible. But something about this situation stirred a painful memory she had tried to bury of when her grandmother, confused by dementia, was treated like an intruder in a department store. An uncomfortable silence filled the room as the manager continued his public humiliation. "Maybe you should try the shelter on 3rd Avenue. They serve free soup to people in your situation." A muffled laugh came from a nearby table where 3 executives in suits watched the spectacle as if it were free entertainment. "These old people think they're entitled to everything," one of them commented loud enough for everyone to hear. Maya took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and walked purposefully to the counter. Her eyes met the old man's briefly. There was not only shame in them, but also a dignity that refused to be completely broken. "I'll pay for his coffee," she announced, placing a $5 bill on the counter. The money represented half of her tips for the day, money she would need for the bus fare for the week. Christopher turned to her with angry eyes. "Maya, stay out of this. This isn't your problem." "It's a matter of human decency," she replied, keeping her voice calm but firm. "And if anyone should be ashamed here, it shouldn't be him." The manager snatched the money back. "Your coffee is served, sir. Courtesy of our employee, who apparently thinks she can make management decisions now." The old man looked at Maya with genuine gratitude, his posture a little straighter as she led him to a table. "Thank you," he whispered. "I didn't expect to find kindness today." Maya just smiled. "My grandmother used to say that kindness isn't something you expect, it's something you practice." The next day, Maya was called into the manager's office before she even started her shift. Christopher was waiting for her with a look of fake concern she knew well, the same one he wore before dismissing employees. "Maya, you do understand that this is a business, not a charity." He didn't wait for her response. "Your behavior yesterday was inappropriate and insubordinate. Worse, you humiliated the staff and management in front of customers." "I paid with my own money," she argued. "This isn't about the money." The mask of calm disappeared instantly. "It's about authority. You made us all look insensitive to promote yourself as some kind of heroine. That's unacceptable." It was when he placed the warning form on the table that Maya felt the first pang of real fear. This was her 3rd job in 18 months and the only one that paid enough to cover her rent and her mother's medication. "Sign this," Christopher ordered, "and consider yourself on probation. One more incident like this and you're out." As she signed the document with slightly trembling hands, Maya noticed something curious about the manager's behavior, an unusual nervousness, as if he too was under pressure. His eyes kept darting to the security camera in the corner of the room, something he had never done before. At the end of her shift, exhausted and demoralized, Maya gathered her things from her locker in the changing room. There, hidden among her belongings, she found a small white envelope with no identification. Inside was a $100 bill and a card that simply read, "Thank you for your kindness. The world needs more people like you." As Maya held the card, a strange feeling of being watched ran down her spine. She looked around, but she was alone in the locker room. Somehow, though, she knew that this unexpected gesture was not just a thank you. It was the beginning of something much bigger. That night, as she prepared dinner for her sick mother in the small apartment they shared, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the old man and the mysterious card. What intrigued her most wasn't the money, but the look in his eyes, not just gratitude, but something deeper, like someone who had finally found what he had been searching for after a long quest. If this story of quiet courage touched your heart, don't forget to sign up to discover how a simple act of kindness can set off twists and turns that change lives forever. Brought to you by Black Voices. In the days that followed, Christopher turned the warning into a personal mission, watching Maya's every move like a hungry hawk. Tours still waiting. 8 minutes late, he whispered in her ear as she balanced a heavy tray. And you forgot the condiment bar again. Her co-workers now avoided her company, as if the manager's indignation was contagious. Only Zoe, a newly hired waitress, seemed immune to the forced distancing. What you did was amazing, Zoe confessed during a break in the break room. Everyone's talking about it, but no one has the guts to say it to your face. Talking about what exactly? Christopher has a nickname among us, the Terminator. It's not the first time. Zoe showed her posts in local groups sharing similar experiences at the coffee shop. A recent post read, "Sorry if we don't look rich enough to drink coffee in your establishment. Why doesn't anyone report him? The owner never shows up and Christopher is related to him. Besides," Zoe lowered her voice, "he controls schedules and tips. Anyone who complains ends up with the worst shifts or is encouraged to leave." That's when a man in an impeccable suit entered the cafe. Maya noticed him immediately, not because of his expensive clothes, but because of his eyes. They were the same as the old man's, but in a transformed face. No beard, perfectly cut hair, straight posture. Christopher, noticing a seemingly wealthy customer, approached with a smile Maya had never seen before. "Welcome, sir. May I recommend our special imported coffee? It's not on the menu. We reserve it for select customers." The man smiled politely. "Thank you. Is the waitress who helped an elderly gentleman here a few days ago working today?" Christopher's smile froze. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't know who you mean. I can take care of you myself." "I insist. I would like to be served by her." Christopher called Maya over with a stiff gesture. "This gentleman is asking for you." The man extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you formally, Maya. I'm Edward Thornton." The name struck Maya like lightning. Edward Thornton, the billionaire philanthropist, occasionally seen in reports about million-dollar donations. The same man she had defended, disguised as an elderly man. "I'd like to invite you for a chat," he said, handing her a gold card. "It's not a job interview. It's about something much more meaningful." That night, researching at home, Maya discovered that Thornton wasn't just rich. He was legendary for investing in people and causes ignored by others. More intriguing, he owned a chain of coffee shops that competed directly with the company she worked for. Before launching new projects, Thornton often tested environments, showing up in disguise to observe authentic behavior. The method was known as the Thornton test. The next morning, a formal letter arrived at Maya's apartment. Inside, along with an invitation to lunch at the Alexander Hotel, were old photos of the coffee shop where she worked. The images showed an original 1920s establishment with Johnson's Coffee Shop on the front. A handwritten note read, *, your grandmother was right about kindness. And maybe you should know that this place has a history that someone wants to hide from you. Maya held the photos with trembling hands. Johnson, her last name. Coincidence or connection? At the end of the day, Maya found a flash drive in her locker with a label. Watch before tomorrow's lunch. At home, she discovered 3 files. Historical records showing that the cafe had originally belonged to the Johnson family in the 1930s, recent photos of discriminatory treatment at the establishment, and most shocking of all, a partnership agreement dated 1932, proving that the cafe had never been sold, but stolen through fraud when her great-grandfather fell ill. Maya sat in silence, absorbing the revelation. This place, where she had been treated like an outsider, had been built by her own family. A heritage stolen through systemic discrimination that almost a century later could finally be exposed. Her phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. Christopher is panicking. The parent company is sending inspectors tomorrow. Serious allegations of discrimination. What did you do? As she typed her reply, Maya felt a determination grow inside her. Not impulsive anger, but something more powerful. In the shadows of her small kitchen, laptop light illuminating her face, Maya Johnson no longer looked like an intimidated waitress, but an ace preparing to claim her stolen legacy. When justice takes nearly a century, she whispered to herself, its arrival must be perfect. The Alexander Hotel was a monument to old-world elegance with marble columns and chandeliers that had witnessed decades of meetings between the powerful. Maya, in her only formal dress, crossed the lobby feeling eyes questioning her presence there. Edward Thornton waited in a private room, standing by the window. He was not alone. A middle-aged woman with impeccably pinned gray hair and a younger man with modern glasses stood up when she entered. Maya Johnson. Meet Margaret Chun, my corporate lawyer, and James Washington, an expert in property law and restorative justice, Thornton introduced. We've reviewed the documents, Margaret said bluntly. The 1932 contract is clearly fraudulent. Your great-grandfather Thomas Johnson never sold the coffee shop. It was taken from him in a scheme. This isn't uncommon, James added, adjusting his glasses. During the Great Depression and after, many properties owned by black families were appropriated. The system was designed to ensure that these cases were never properly reviewed. Maya absorbed the information as slides appeared on a digital screen. Images of the original diner, property deeds, and a meticulously traced timeline showing how the Reed family had systematically erased the Johnsons' contribution. The question is, Thornton said, sitting down across from her. What do you want to do with this information? Meanwhile, at the coffee shop, Christopher faced his own nightmare. Two executives from corporate headquarters had arrived unannounced, demanding access to hiring records, customer complaints, and security footage. It's just a routine audit, one assured him, though his tone suggested otherwise. While rummaging through documents in his office, Christopher found something disturbing. An old folder labeled Johnson that he had never seen before. Inside were black and white photos of the original coffee shop with a proud black family posing in front of the entrance. His phone rang. Christopher Reed, he answered, trying to sound confident. Mr. Reed, the voice on the other end was cold, professional. This is the legal counsel for Thornton Hospitality Group. We are notifying you of legal action regarding the property known as Reed Coffee House, formerly Johnson Family Café. Christopher's blood ran cold. He hung up and immediately called his father, Richard Reed, regional vice president of the corporation. Dad, we have a problem, he said, his voice shaking. Something about the coffee shop, about the Johnsons. There was a long silence on the other end. Then who found out? The waitress. Maya Johnson. Another silence. How much does she know? Everything, apparently. And she has Edward Thornton backing her. His father's heavy breathing was the only response for several seconds. Come to my office now. 3 hours later, Maya returned to the coffee shop accompanied by Edward Thornton, his lawyers, and a discreet film crew. Regular customers watched curiously as the group settled into a central table. Christopher emerged from his office, his pale face contrasting with Richard Reed at his side. Taller, older, but with the same expression of arrogant superiority that characterized his son. Mr. Thornton, Richard greeted him with a forced smile. To what do we owe the honor? Edward didn't answer. Instead, he nodded to Maya. She stood up, calm and determined. Mr. Reed, I'd like to show you and the patrons of this establishment something. With a click, the lights dimmed and a projector illuminated the main wall. The first image showed the original 1932 café, Johnson Family Café, clear on the front, with Maya's family proudly gathered in front. This café was built by Thomas Johnson, my great-grandfather, Maya announced, her voice surprisingly steady. It was the first establishment in town to serve both black and white customers at a time when that was revolutionary. The images advanced documents, letters, the fraudulent contract signed while Thomas was hospitalized with pneumonia. When my great-grandfather fell ill, Harold Reed, your grandfather, Mr. Reed, forged documents transferring ownership to the Reed family. The café was never sold. It was stolen. Murmurs rippled through the establishment. Zoe and other employees watched open-mouthed. Richard Reed took a step forward, but Christopher stopped him, his eyes fixed on a new image on the screen, his own email sent to corporate headquarters 2 years earlier. I discovered some old documents about the original acquisition of the property. Possible legal problem with Johnson. Recommend destroy and deny knowledge if questioned. Asterisk. The silence was absolute. Christopher stared at Maya with a mixture of shock and anger. How did you? She replied simply, apparently, someone in the company's IT department kept copies. Richard regained his composure first. These are baseless allegations. Documents can be forged. Stories can be fabricated. That's when Edward Thornton finally spoke, his calm voice cutting through the air like a knife. That's why we invited these people, too. The main doors opened and cameras from 3 TV stations entered, followed by journalists and, more surprisingly, the corporation's CEO. Mr. Reed, the CEO said with calculated coldness. It seems we have a serious legacy problem here. Richard's face turned red. John, we can resolve this internally. It's past that stage, the CEO interrupted. Turning to the cameras, he continued, as CEO of Reed Hospitality Group, I am deeply disturbed by these findings. We are launching a full investigation and are committed to correcting any historical injustices identified. Christopher staggered backward, leaning on the counter. This is going to destroy us, he whispered. Maya watched him, not with triumph, but with quiet resolve. No, she replied, low enough for only him to hear. This will restore something that should never have been taken away. As the cameras rolled and reporters asked questions, Maya remained composed, her gaze occasionally meeting Edward Thornton's. The man who had entered her life as a humiliated old man now offered her a slight nod of approval. The coffee shop had never been so quiet, and at the same time so full of contained noise, the sound of decades of injustice finally being confronted in the light of day. That night, as the story dominated the local news, Maya sat in the kitchen of her small apartment, watching her sick mother fall peacefully asleep for the first time in months. A story of theft and erasure was being rewritten, not with vengeance, but with truth. And that truth, Maya realized as she turned off the TV, was just the beginning of something much bigger than she had imagined when she offered $5 to a stranger in need. 3 months have passed since the day of the revelation at the coffee shop. What began as a local news story quickly grew into a landmark case of restorative justice that captured national attention. Maya stopped in front of the historic, now renovated building. The original Johnson Family Café sign gleamed once again on the facade, restored from old photographs. The newly installed glass doors reflected her face, no longer that of an intimidated waitress, but of a woman who had regained not only a property, but her place in history. Are you ready? Asked Edward Thornton, approaching quietly. It almost doesn't seem real, she replied, studying the building that now legally belonged to the Johnson Foundation, created with $1 million settlement that the Reed Hospitality Group was forced to pay. Your grandmother would be proud, he said. Behind them, a small crowd gathered for the reopening, reporters, local residents, and most importantly, young people from marginalized communities who had been selected for the hospitality training program that would be offered at the space. In a cafe across town, Christopher Reed stared at a cup of cheap coffee. His father, Richard, had resigned from the corporation after the exposure, and Christopher had been publicly fired as part of the corporate integrity rebuild announced by the CEO. Your order, sir, asked a young waiter, clearly not recognizing him. A blessing in disguise. Christopher didn't even look up. Just coffee. The cheapest. There was no more corporate card, company car, or luxury apartment. The fall had been swift and brutal. Social media had taken it upon itself to make him the face of corporate discrimination. His name and image circulating in news reports about the case. Back at the Johnson Family Café, Maya cut the ribbon as flashbulbs popped. At her side was her mother in a wheelchair, smiling through tears. This space will not just be a cafe, Maya announced into the microphone. It will be a center of opportunity and remembrance. Every cup served here will tell a story of resistance, and every customer will be welcomed with a dignity that every human being deserves. Applause echoed down the street. Among the crowd, Zoe smiled broadly, now the operations manager of the new establishment. That afternoon, after the crowd dispersed, Maya found Edward sitting alone at a corner table, watching the first customers come in. "Why did you choose to test people like that?" She finally asked the question that had puzzled her from the beginning, disguised as a needy old man. Edward gazed at his cup for a moment. "When you have money, Maya, people show you only their best selves. Perfect masks. I never know who they really are until they believe there's nothing left to gain." "And what did you gain from all this?" she asked. "Hope," he replied simply. "The confirmation that there are still people willing to do the right thing even when no one is looking." The following week, the Johnson Family Café opened its first exhibition, an entire wall dedicated to documenting the history of the establishment from its founding to the robbery and finally its restoration. In the center, an enlarged photograph showed Thomas Johnson, Maya's great-grandfather, standing in front of the original café. Richard Reed, forced into a humiliating out-of-court settlement, had been required to attend the exhibition opening as part of the agreement. He stood in a corner, visibly uncomfortable as visitors occasionally stared at him, recognizing him from the news. At one point, Maya deliberately approached him. "Mr. Reed," he stiffened. "Miss Johnson, do you know why I didn't sue your family criminally even though I had enough evidence?" Richard shook his head, unable to maintain eye contact. "Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about right, about truth." She paused. And truth, unlike power or money, can never be stolen, only temporarily hidden. A month later, Business Ethics magazine published a full-page profile of Maya, highlighting her as an example of a new generation of business leaders committed to social justice. That same month, Christopher Reed, unable to find work in the industry, began working at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. "What would you do differently?" a reporter asked Maya during an interview. "If you could go back to that day in the coffee shop," Maya smiled. "Absolutely nothing. Every moment of that humiliation led me exactly where I needed to be." On the last page of the article, a photo showed Maya and Edward side by side in the new coffee shop. Not as boss and employee, not as savior and victim, but as equal partners in a shared mission of transformation. Below the image was a simple quote from Maya. "Kindness is not weakness. It's the courage to keep your humanity intact in a world that constantly tries to steal it from you." Meanwhile, at another cafe in town, Christopher Reed was being turned down for yet another job interview. His name now synonymous with corporate prejudice. His future as empty as his gaze. "My life is ruined," he muttered to himself. A waitress approached, placing a fresh cup of coffee on his table. "On the house," she said kindly, recognizing his situation. Christopher looked up, surprised by the unexpected kindness, the same kindness he had denied so many others. Sometimes the best lesson isn't just losing what you have, but finally understanding the value of what you never knew to appreciate. This is the transformative power of a simple act of kindness. It can destroy empires of arrogance and build legacies of dignity. If this story of courage and justice touched your heart, sign up for more stories that prove true greatness isn't about how much money you have, but how you treat those who seem to have nothing to offer. Brought to you by Black Voices.